Hello everyone and welcome to video lecture 9 for CM Construction Management stream on Enscape. This is the first of two videos looking at Enscape. In this first video we are going to look at materials, assets and landscapes. We'll start by looking at how to install the plugin Enscape into Sketchup. Then we'll look at how to real-time go from Sketchup to Enscape and vice versa. We'll have a look at how to add all of our materials and make sure they're all working properly and looking good. Then we'll have a look at assets and how to make it feel like a real space that's actually lived in and occupied, and how to put some landscape in there so it's all starting to feel like a proper house. Then in the next video, part 2 for Enscape, we'll look at lighting and how to export your beautiful client perspectives. For now, let's get stuck in with materials, assets and landscape. All right, time to install Enscape onto our computer so that it runs in SketchUp. What we need to do is go to enscape3d.com. Under the solutions page, we want to get a free student license. Click on students, get free educational license, student, get free license. Then you want to put in, very important, is your Curtin email. So that will be your name at student.curtin or your student number at student.curtin. Either is fine. All of your information, then it's going to do a reCAPTCHA, and you're going to get an email that looks something like this. Please confirm your address, confirm email. It will take you back to Enscape again, and then a little bit later you'll get an education key. Sometimes this can take a couple of days because somebody needs to check your status, but if you've used your Curtin email, you should be fine. It should automatically see that it's got a .edu.au, and that'll do it for you. Then you go into download Enscape. That would take you to a page like this one here. The beauty of Enscape is that it's one download and it will work automatically as a plugin for all of your different software. So if you're also using Revit or ArchiCAD or Rhino, if you're looking at this video a little bit later in your architectural education, same plugin is going to work for all of those for you. So download for Windows, and that will then open up as a file which looks a lot like this one here. Install that as normal, and then we go back to SketchUp. That will be installed in the background, and then all we need to do is, once we reload SketchUp, very important that you close it and reload it, it will say extensions and then Enscape, and we'll have these here ready to go. You can just go straight into start Enscape, but typically what I prefer to do is actually install the toolbar. So go view, toolbars, and then go down to Enscape and then close. And then we're going to go ahead and lock this one up here. I like to use Enscape quite a lot, so I'm going to put it right in the middle here where I can see everything that I'm doing. And then we can go ahead and start Enscape from there. And we've got all of our tools here ready to go. We don't have to keep going back up to extensions, etc. All right, let's jump in. All right, so here we are in Enscape. It's dropped us right inside the model exactly where we were looking. If I go back to SketchUp, we'll see that that's exactly where I was standing before. Here we are again. So pretty straightforward in terms of navigating the model. The left-hand click allows you to look around. The right-hand click allows you to change your position and where you're standing, kind of like an orbit in SketchUp. Your WASD keys allow you to move around. So W forward, S backwards, D side, A side, left and right. Your Q and E allow you to move up and down. So Q for down, E for up. And then, of course, you can use them in tandem so we can move around as we're going and navigate through the model. And it might take a little bit of time to get used to moving around, but don't worry, you'll get better with experience. There's quite a few tools up the top here, and we'll get to them in time. Probably the first ones we want to edit is just our settings. The big thing for me is the movement speed. So typical is on 1, and I'll show you what this looks like. So if I move around now, it takes quite a while to get anywhere in the model, and that can be a little bit frustrating. So most of the time I'll bump this up to 2 just while I'm working, so that I can get around places a little bit faster. That's just in my movement speed. I put that into 2, press enter, go back out, and we can see that's a little bit faster now. So while I'm moving around, I can get there a little bit quicker. I can scroll, which will move me a little bit faster as well, scrolling inwards and forwards and backwards. But I find typically just putting that movement speed up to 2 is enough that I can comfortably edit and get things done. Up the top left-hand side, we've got our main controls. Collaborative annotation allows for other people to edit it. BIM mode, we don't need to work on yet because we're in SketchUp, not necessarily BIM with Revit or ArchiCAD. View management is going to be an important one for us. So this allows us to toggle through different views, and this will be relative to the cameras that you've already saved in SketchUp. So if you saved some cameras or you've put together some scenes in SketchUp, we'll have recognized this one by now. That will also come through into Enscape, and we've got our section cuts in there as well, which is pretty cool. So having your views open not only allows you to go back to the view you were looking at before to check it and make sure that you're showing your USP and all of the features of the house are looking good, but also allows you to navigate quite quickly from space to space. So if I need to jump from this part here to this part here or whatever, I can do that through my view management. Asset library is there, site context, video editor, take screenshot is going to be a useful one for us as well. So we can take a view of what's going on in here. Batch rendering allows us to render out all of these scenes in one go. So if we want to go to dinner and get all of these rendering in the background while we do that, or go to bed and get these rendering in the background, we can do that. We can do a panorama. We can export the model as an executable, so we can actually give it to the client and they can walk around this in real time as well by themselves, which of course is an amazing opportunity for us to be able to show that off. You've got your mini map, your save frames, projection modes, navigation mode is what we're in at the moment. We can change this to walk mode, which just means we don't really move up or down. And you notice that the Q key and the E key are disabled. Most of the time while I'm editing, I'll be in fly mode though, just so I can get up and down and move around as needed to be able to see things properly. VR headset, we've got the visual settings, so we can play. We'll get to more of this when we get to lighting and camera control a little bit later. But we can turn down the rendering quality, might be something you need to do before you get started. If your computer is running a little bit slowly, you might need to turn this down into draft mode or medium so that you can edit, do your work, and then when you're ready to later, when you're happy to just stand still inside the model so that you can take your render, you can push it back up into high mode and go from there. And we've got some other things to play with, of course. We can edit what's going on in the image. We can change the atmospheric effects, change what's going on in the sky, and we can change our outputs as well, whether that's a full HD image that we're taking, what type of file it is, a JPEG or PNG, the compression, etc. So plenty to play with in here inside all of your settings at the top. And then let's get stuck into starting to making some edits in here and putting together an interesting and beautiful set of perspectives. So the first thing we're going to have to do is a split screen so that we can see what we're doing. The edits that we make are made in SketchUp and then visualized in Enscape. So we need to have both of them operating at the same time. When I'm working, I have two screens running, so I don't often have a split screen, but for the purpose of this video and making sure everything's visible to you, we'll run this as a split screen for now. So we can see I've got SketchUp on one side, Enscape on the other. I'll get rid of the views for now, just so I've got enough room to see what I'm doing. And I'm going to move my tray over. I'll still need my tags and stuff like that, but for now, at least I can see what I'm doing in SketchUp. Okay, so as normal in SketchUp, we can move around here. And what we do in SketchUp is going to make changes to our perspective that we have here. So the first thing we want to do is start thinking about adding materials. So what I like to do is open up the Enscape material library. I don't worry too much about using SketchUp's materials because Enscape's materials just tend to look better. So what I'll do is I'll go to the specific type of material. Fortunately for me, brick is exactly what I'm looking for up front. So I can go ahead and grab brick number 4, click on import selection. That'll tell you when it's done depending on your internet speed. Import materials can now be applied or edited. Close. Then we go up to Enscape material editor. This one up here, that will open a dialog box. My screen's getting a bit squished here now, but we can see we've got brick number 4. We know this is a new one because it's got a little orange tab next to it that says this is new and it hasn't been used yet. Once we click on brick 4, what we'll see is that our paint bucket, getting very squishy here, has automatically been updated to have brick 04 as the current material that we're adding, which is very helpful. because now we can start adding to our model. So if I click on this column here, we'll notice that it's changed what's going on that material there. I can do the next one, the next one, the next one, and I can keep on going around here. And we'll see that this is adding bricks to the house as we go. And we've got to move around a bit. We've got these arches as well. I'm going to hide this so I can see what I'm doing. Great. Okay. So we've got a bit up here that needs doing. Good. All right. I'm pretty happy with that. That's everything that I need to be brick. So now what we need to do is edit the material. So that's not exactly the color that we're looking for. So let's open that material editor back up again. We've got quite a few things that we can play with in here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to zoom a little closer to this one up here so that we can see our material from side on like that. All right. So the first thing we can look at is what's called the albedo, which really it just means what is the texture. So in this case, it's a brick, and then what is the color underpinning that texture. So that's the texture, that's the brick, and we can see a little version of that image there that's tiled, so it's going to copy over and over again, and all the edges fit together nicely so that we don't see any seams. Then under here we've got the tint color. So if I change this tint color to something really obtuse, we'll see that how much it changes it. So it's going to add a green over the top of that. But if I add white underneath here, and then I bring the image faded down, what it's going to do is it's going to give us more of a gray tone to that. Likewise, if I was to put black underneath here, I can get black bricks, of course, but I can also bring this down a bit to just make that brown color that was already there a little bit darker. So what you want to do is think about your tints in terms of what color do I need to mix with what I've already got here in my texture in order to get closer to the color that we're looking for. So this is closer to that kind of limestoney color, particularly when the sun hits it the right way, of what we're looking for. If I push that up, that's a little bit too brown. Bring this back a bit and sit back. Yeah, that's pretty close actually to what we're looking for. So that's the first thing, is getting your albedos right. The next thing we can look at is the height, which is sometimes called a bump, sometimes called a normal map, which we can see here. And that's just telling Enscape how much these bricks are coming out and how much the gaps are pushing back. Okay, so if we were to bump this up a bit, we would see that it's getting more and more extreme. So this is in the negatives, and we can really see how much this is pushing back. So let's just go ahead and put this back up to 1. We can bump this upwards in the other direction too. So if I were to put this up to 10, we'll see that that is really making very, very deep grooves inside here. Too deep, unnecessarily deep. Most of the time you'll find that the normal, which comes with your material that you bring in, will be perfectly fine. You won't need to adjust that too much. But every now and again, let's say you're putting tiles in a bathroom, the grout is just a little bit too deep for your liking. This is where you change that. We've got our reflections as well. So we don't have too much of a reflection in our brickwork. Where it's important is areas like this, where we want to see a bit of that curvature and it's catching the sunlight around there in the background. That's really good to have a bit of specular going on. We can see if I change this, it's going to change the amount of visibility we have there in terms of that light. So let's just undo that and bring that back. Quite happy with how that looks. If I was to change this to a metallic material, we know bricks aren't metallic, but if I was to change that, we'll see what happens. It starts to add a sheen to it. It starts to give the impression that these are maybe embossed brick shapes in some pressed tin or something like that. So we can add a metallic feature to any material that we want to. Now, you've got to think carefully about what you're actually trying to show. We don't do that just for the sake of doing that. We do that because we're playing with a metal material. So those are the 3 main things you need to play with. There's plenty of other areas you can edit in your materials, but to play it safe, I would just stick with those 3 for now. All right, let's go ahead and make a metallic material for this window bay that we've got up here. It's like a brassy color, I reckon. So what we'll do is we'll go back into SketchUp, go to select with spacebar so that we can get back over to that particular material. Once again, we need to edit it in SketchUp rather than editing it in Enscape. So what we need to do is bring up our material library again, and this time we're going to go down into the metals, and I want a brass. Yeah, let's go with a stainless brass, something with a bit of shine to it. Import selection. Once we're done, we can close that. Back to our material editor, and we can see once again we've got that orange tick, which means this one's a new one. It helps us to find it. And we've got our brass material, we've clicked on it. So if we go back into SketchUp now and we go to our paint bucket, we can see that yes, brass has been selected for us, and we can select this. I want you to watch what happens when I select this window, which is in a group. And all I'm trying to do is this right edge here, but watch what happens when I just click on the group. It does the entire thing. So not only has it done the entire frame inside and outside, it's also done the glazing itself. Bit of an issue. So what we need to do when we're changing material that's inside a group is to actually double click through into the group first and click on the face. Okay. So a good example of this is I actually did want everything to be that brass material, just not the glazing itself. So what I can do is in SketchUp, because SketchUp glazing is perfectly fine, we're going to go and find a glass material. So if you need to bring up your material section, let's bring this over here. We can go ahead and go select into glass and mirrors. And then I'm going to go ahead and go translucent glass gray, this one here. And then because we've double clicked, again, I can click out of this, double click in, click just the face, grab the material that we want, click on that, and we'll notice it has just changed that glazing material. I've still got my brass trim all the way around there, right? Now, even though that was a SketchUp material, it's automatically added it into the Enscape material library, and because we've currently got it selected, it's also currently selected in here. So it goes both ways. We can select something here and it'll go to the paint bucket in SketchUp, or we can select something in the SketchUp materials and it will bring it into the Enscape. Very, very useful. Typically, as you know, I like to have darker glazing, gets better reflections, and it looks more realistic. When we stand outside in the sun and we're looking inside, often windows will look black by comparison because it's so much darker inside the house than it is outside in the sun. So I'll usually go into a black. I can adjust that upwards, of course, totally up to us as we see fit. Let's go back to that brass material because I'm not quite happy with how that's looking. A little bit too shiny, a little bit too glossy. So my tint color I'm going to change to a white, and I'm just going to bring this down a little bit, make it a little bit less intense. And let's step back just to be able to see what's going on in the house here. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm happy with something like that. Not so intense. Something around the 40% mark. If we turn it back up to 100, we can see it's not looking realistic at all. It's throwing way too much of that orange bounce back and reflections onto the glazing. Not happy with that. So around that 40% mark, particularly in this full bright sun, I think that's looking much more accurate. Don't need to edit any of this stuff up here. We can play with the metalness, and that's going to change the reflections, which we can see up there. But I'm perfectly happy with that staying full metal. We've got some transparencies and things like that we can play with. That's more relevant going back to this glass here. We can play, of course, with the transparency and how opaque it is, whether we can see all the way in or whether it gets a little bit darker inside there as well. That's totally up to you. Frosted glass there as well. You can play with that. All right, now let's have a look at a couple of issues that we've got going on with our materials. So let's go ahead and we'll pull back out a bit, and we'll notice that not only is it happening in Enscape, it's happening in SketchUp too. So we can see this white is bleeding into our brickwork there, and the same thing is happening inside Enscape. So it's trying to render out two materials in exactly the same plane at the same time. And we're getting all sorts of higgledy-piggledy business inside there, not looking very good at all. So what we're going to do is we need to push this backwards. So we know that this doesn't actually sit proud. These brick columns do come up past here. So we need to push this back. If we were to pull it forward, we would see that it comes all the way out here and we get a bit of a shadow line, but that's not what actually happens in this particular house. So I'm just going to set it back by 20 mil, something like that, just to give that little bit of lip there and a nice little shadow line. And now if we pull back, we can see actually that looks a lot better, a lot more accurate to what we've been doing in the rest of the house. If we need to get back to a material that we've used already in the model, there are a couple ways to do it. Of course, we can go back to the Enscape material editor. Another thing we can do is in SketchUp, when we've got paint bucket selected, is we can change up here. If we scroll up, we can go to in model, and then we can just go back into the previous material. So brick 4 is over here. Then I can go back into my model and I can click here and I've got the bricks that I needed. Another issue that we can see we've got going on here is the scale of the bricks is working perfectly up here on the flat faces of the house, but not so much on these columns that we've got down here. It's all getting quite squished, not doing what we want it to do. It's working nicely in the arch and in between, but not up here. This is what's called texture mapping, and the coordinates are not quite correct for what we need to do. So basically the column isn't matching the arches, isn't matching the rest of the house up here. So what we need to do is we need to isolate this particular column so that it's measured differently to what's going on in the rest of the house. Pretty straightforward to do. So if we come back into the SketchUp face, double click on the group, grab one face again, then we right click, we go make unique texture, create texture, and then we'll see that that was this one here. Go back to here, and that is now working correctly. We can see that the seam of that arch is now working with the brick. So we've got the correct coordinates now, the mapping is correct. Now all we need to do is edit that color so that it matches what we did with the previous color. So we'll notice if we go back into our material editor, we'll see that we've got a second brick. So this is the brick that we already did before. We put that tint color in, which was this one over here. Then we've went to 58.5. So all we really need to do is match that we did. So this one here, 58.5, and we'll notice it is now seamless with the rest of the model. So anywhere that you find that you've got material textures that don't quite work properly and that aren't matching the coordinates or aren't matching the scale of your other materials, simple process of going through, click the face, make unique texture, create texture, and then go ahead and change the settings so that it matches the texture that you've already edited. If you didn't make any edits to the texture, you just put it straight in from Enscape, there won't be any editing to do. That's unlikely. Most of the time you will have to edit it because your material in real life doesn't actually look exactly like that. So you just need to come back in. Every time I make it a unique texture, it'll make a new material of the same name, but with a new number after it. So #2, number 2 version of brick 4, that one there. Now what I want to do is start to isolate these different floor materials. So at the moment, I've got a floor material which is running through the entire model. So if I zoom back out and I have a look around, I can see that this floor material is actually just running through the whole thing. So I've drawn a big rectangle all the way through, which is fine for my early modeling, but not fine right now when I want to get a specific material here for my grass. I want to get timber lining inside that interior. I want some travertine in this hallway and travertine for the pool out there. Okay, so we know we need to make some changes to the model here. Pretty straightforward. All we got to do is go back and make individual slabs so that we've got an individual face for each one of here. If I do a material on this whole face that we have inside here, we know exactly what's going to happen. So if I click on that, it's going to put that material absolutely everywhere inside the model, which is not really what we're looking for. So we need to make individual faces for that. Now you can do that by simply isolating that model and starting to draw lines in. So if I bring that back, run my tape measure along this edge here, isolate that again, run a line on this face here, line all the way through there, down to the end. We'll see I've now isolated 2 different faces. And then if I were to, let's just put an orange color here, we can see it's just put one material there. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is just to make new slabs. The easiest way to do this is to actually just start making some new faces into that existing slab. So what we can do is, provided you've made this into a group and that it can be isolated as just the slab, we can start drawing some faces in it. So what I can do is, using my tape measure tool, I can figure out where my new faces need to be. So I can go from here to here. I want to put an extra line through here just to put some slab on the underside of that bulkhead. Then I need an edge along here for my grass. Cool. Okay, so then we isolate it. Colon to isolate, provided you installed that shortcut. We go and we draw a rectangle in through here. That is going to give us a new face so that we can start to add material there. So we go once again back up into our Enscape materials. We've got grounds. I'm going to go for grass number 4. I think I like the most. Import selection. Jump back out of there. Paint bucket. And grass. There we go. Let's have a look at it in Enscape. Nice. Yeah. Pretty happy with that. Then we just need to go around the model editing all of those different materials. So we'll need a different one for underneath this bulkhead. We've got this line of concrete out here at the point of arrival. Then we're going to have some timber inside there. Then we're going to have a different material, or we might run the concrete through there actually. And then we're going to need some different material for the pool back in there. So let's go ahead and do that now. All right, so I've made a concrete area, a timber area, and then a travertine or a stone area for the pool. We'll go ahead, follow that same set of steps again. Put 3 materials in there, but I can see all 3 of them with my 3 orange ticks. So we can go concrete first. It's going to be this one here. Then we'll go to our Enscape. Have a look over here. Needs to be a little lighter. Yeah, I reckon we can go ahead and put that concrete up here too. Okay, we've got our marble. And we've got our wood. And while we're there, let's go ahead and put the wood on the interior of the house. Remember, we need to double click on the group if we want to isolate a face. Looking a little funny through here, not quite matching. So again, just like we did with the slab, we can go back in, make an edit to this line here. Better. Great. Okay. Bit more to go. All right, now these columns definitely need to be metallic. So once again, back in. Brushed. And it looks like these have got a back face as well. So we've got to go around, always double check that. I think I want to be a little bit shinier. So I might actually change over to the stainless aluminium instead. Let's do that. Let's have a look. Maybe too shiny on that one, but we can bring that back a little bit. Yeah, I think I prefer that. All right, so pretty happy with the progress now. Want to get over here to the pool, as we needed to make some edits. Obviously, we don't have a pool at the moment. We've got a flat zone. So let's jump back into Sketchup. We need to build out that pool. Ultimately, this comes down to how much detail you're adding in the model, and it comes down to the USP. The pool and the garden, the twin courtyards going on there, is definitely a core feature of this house. So I'm going to make the effort to build this pool into the model. Pretty straightforward in what we need to do. We're just going to build out some guidelines again, of course, and we're just going to make this pool where we need to have it. All right, so I've traced around the edge of the pool. I can go ahead and push this down now. What I'm going to do first though is actually just bring the whole pool down so that I've got something to push into. So I'm just going to separate the pool on the side here, and again on the side here. I just need to give myself enough slab to work with. So let's go ahead and we'll pull all of that down. We're going to need to make some guides under here as well. Let's go ahead and do that. Draw that in, rectangle, grab that face, and I'm going to go ahead and give myself plenty of room. I'm going to call it 2 meters. This pool's definitely not that deep, so that's plenty to push down into. And then that way I can go ahead and push down, let's call it 1500, I reckon is plenty. Okay, so we've got the basis of our pool here. Now we know we need to add these steps in. We've got some lines here that we've left in. Maybe you deleted out lines for stairs. You can always go ahead and import some lines back in, or you can jump into AutoCAD and just measure the distances between the two. I've left them in for now. So simple as building out any normal stairs, group, down, pool, let's call it 200. And we've got this smaller one here, rectangle, group, push down, 200. And these steps will be the same. So I can just go ahead and make a copy of that. Actually, let's push that out of the way, make my life a little bit easier. Down to 200, and then let's go down again to this point here, and then I know that the steps don't go all the way down. We only had 3 lines there, 3 steps. So what this is it's a step, step, and then a plunge down into the pool. So we can just grab the bottom of this guy here. Then we have ourselves our pool. Go back, grab that marble texture again. Marble, marble, marble. Nice, let's have a look. All right, looking good. Now we are missing our water. So we can copy the bottom of the pool up, bring it upwards. I'm gonna go ahead and do a Control-C, Control-V this time and bring that over here. So I wanna isolate it outside of that group. Control-X to cut it out, get out of the group, Control-V, we don't want to intersect with this tree, so go where nothing else is, and Control-G, make it its own group. Then I'm going to bring it back in here where it sits. I've got a little bit here I need to trim off, so unisolate this, from there to there, isolate, cool. I just want to bring this edge in, from there to there. Then I'm going to bring that waterline down a little bit because it's not going to sit perfectly where it is there. So let's go down, constrained to blue, let's go down by 50 mil. And then that's going to give us a nice shadow line for the pool. Then we can go ahead and add water to it. Voila, we have water in our pool. And so Enscape will move the water around a little bit and then it'll pause for you. So you can take a shot of the screenshot like that. Of course, just like any other material, we can go back into our watercolor. We can change what's going on there. So if I want to add a tint to the water, if I want to bring it down a little bit so it's just not so opaque, so transparent, we can just edit that inside of here as well. You can play with the height, you can play with the scale. So if it's feeling too much like a river or an ocean compared to a pool, you can go and do all of that stuff inside your material editor there as well. But I'm pretty happy with that water. It's got some nice reflections. We can see the depth of the pool, looks like a natural color. So we're just getting the color from the stone coming through there rather than coloring the pool itself, which is very similar to what the actual house is doing. All right, so we're pretty happy with where we are now in our materials. We've got most of the outside covered. We've got the pool looking pretty good. We've got our glazing, got our metals. Everything is looking the way we want it to look. Now, when you're in your SketchUp model, you'll notice now that we've added all of those materials in, it's looking pretty rough inside here. So if you're worried about the way this looks, you're happy with Enscape, but you don't want SketchUp to look like this, simple workaround. So say, for example, you want to show your client a white model. If we go up into View, Face Style, and Monochrome, that will bring it back to the white model. So we can still keep all of the textures there so that Enscape can see them, but we can show the client the white model, and that way it looks a little bit cleaner. When I'm working though, I do like to keep it on View, Face Style, Shaded with Textures. That way I can see what I'm doing in Enscape. Now that we're finished with our materials, we can move on to assets. Assets is the objects that we place into the space to give it some more life and make it feel realistic. So we've got things like people, appliances, taps, light fittings, that kind of stuff that we'll add into the space. The beauty of Enscape is a lot of that stuff is already built in for you, and we can start to add that in as part of your assets library, this one up here. So click on that. And these are the sorts of things you'll expect to see inside an assets library. There's 3,500 of them, so you can pick and choose the stuff that is right for you. So say, for example, you want to start to add some furniture into the space. We've got some furniture here. We can choose something that is appropriate. Let's say I want a dining setting, something to just chuck along the edge here. We can scroll down until we find exactly that. Here we go, we've got a dining table. Go ahead and add that into here. We can see it inside the Sketchup model. It's not going to appear in Enscape. It's over here in Sketchup. We can click on that, put it over to one side, give that a second to download, and that will import it in. If we scroll over to here, we can see we've got our table inside there, inside Enscape. We need to click away from that inside our Sketchup file. Otherwise, we're just going to keep putting tables in. So spacebar to go back into our assets library. Once we've got the tables, we might then want to go ahead and grab some chairs. If I scroll up into the chairs section, let's say we want something like, I don't know, this one here. Then we can go ahead and put chairs up against that table. Say we want one here and another one here. And then we need some to be on the end, so we can chuck them in here, and then we can rotate them once we're done. Spacebar to finish. Q, of course, to do our rotations. Pick some pretty ugly chairs, but you get the picture. The beauty of the assets library is that you can very quickly test and see what's working for you and what's not working for you. Now, you can, of course, choose furniture that is most similar to the images that you've been looking at, or you can think of a different type of furniture that would also suit that space as well to bring the USP as clearly as possible. That is a set of dining furniture there. I'm not happy with those chairs at all, so I'm going to go ahead and delete them. Easy as. Let's jump back into SketchUp. Delete, 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 delete. And that'll open up that space back up again. You can, of course, fill your scene with as many assets as you want to. The more assets you add, the more it might start to slow down your computer, so you need to keep that in mind. Be careful of adding assets just for the sake of adding assets. And if you do it, you want to do it in such a way that it feels realistic. Often we'll see something like this, where we have an empty room and let's say a treadmill, something like that, or an exercise bike. Perfectly fine. And we'll get something like this where a person just puts an exercise bike in the middle of the room and then calls that a gym, and then says, that's my asset. I've got an asset. I did the work. It's looking out the window. What more do you want from me? You need to be careful that it feels like it would actually be realistic and that would actually be happening in reality. So make sure when you are adding assets that you're adding assets in a thoughtful way and that you're composing the image so that it suits the architecture. More often than not, you'll need a handful of assets. You need to cluster the assets together. So you might put a fruit bowl, a magazine, a couple of glasses, and some cutlery over to one side over here, just sitting in there. Whereas if you were to go cutlery here, fruit bowl there, magazine there, glass there, it would look weird. It would look out of place. So think about the way that you actually engage in the space and the way that you actually experience the space, the way the client would experience the space, and start to set that up the way they would want to feel it, the way they would want to experience it. Another thing to know about assets is people. So people are what you need to be most careful of when you're adding assets into the space. Mostly because they don't look realistic, and our brain and our eyes are evolutionarily trained to spot animals and faces and eyes. So above all, doesn't matter if it's a fake looking table, a fake looking person will be able to recognize almost instantly. Okay, so if I grab this person and I bring her inside here, give it a second to load, from a distance, we're okay. She's setting off in the background, she's in shadow a little bit, so really it's just giving us some scale and proportion inside the space, that's fine. However, if I'm going to take a shot from this distance, we can see that does not look realistic at all, right? And so what it does is it kills the rest of the image. Not only do we not believe that she's real, we go, actually, that grass is looking kind of fake as well. And I don't really like that line there. That seam is not doing me any favors at all. So now I don't believe it. So what you need to do is be careful of where you place people inside the scene. Ideally, you want them to turn their back on you. So if I was going to take a shot out here, I would turn her around inside SketchUp. Q, rotate her around. Then I would also place her further away from the camera, right? So if my camera was going to be positioned something like this, set inside this shot here, maybe back here from the kitchen, looking out, something like that. We want to put her away from the lens a little bit. So we move her away and turn her back on us and put her into some shadow. That is going to work a whole lot better for us than if we have her right in front of the camera and we can see that she's not realistic at all. So this gives us proportion. This tells us what it's like to stand inside this image. Up close kills the shot and makes it look fake. So you need to be very, very careful of that. If you want to edit an asset by resizing it, you can, of course, click on the asset SketchUp, S for scale, and we can start to pull that in. So if I wanted this table to be more of a little breakfast nook table, stretch that in, M for move, and I can just reposition that inside here, there, easy as. If you've got something like a sink, you may just need to make some room for it inside your model. So say for example, I chuck this sink in here, we can see that the timber's coming up all the way to the top. So firstly, let's just position it where we're happy with it. Move it back in, something like that. Then we can grab our model here. Let's just make a rectangle around this face. Go ahead and push that down till we can't see it anymore. And there we go. And that puts our sink inside here so that we can see all the way to the depth in there. Now, of course, we need to go down a little bit deeper so we don't see the wood, and that is the idea. All right, so I've placed some assets in our scene here now. We've got some basic furniture, put together a bit of a kitchen, got some cooktop, some arbitrage. We tried to cluster stuff together so it doesn't look too weird, filling out the spaces that are obviously designed as a feature. Remember our USP? So this is a little study nook, so kids can sit there and study, look at the computer while parents are doing what they do. I've chucked a curtain in this window here just to kind of catch that light off to the side, put some cushions down on the seat, put a table, laid out some coffee and cups, some water, some strawberries, that kind of thing. Chairs in the space, and that's pretty much all we need. The other thing to look at is just the people. If in doubt, you can go ahead and leave people out. Often in client renders, in projections of what the space might look like, we can actually leave people out of the shot altogether. So if it's worrying you, if it's just making it look too fake, if you don't like it, leave them out. I'm going to be taking a shot from further back here anyway. So to me, it doesn't really matter that I'm just kind of getting the light catching off this person's shoulder and it looks like a discussion maybe happening over that way. If I was going to be taking a shot much closer inside here, I might be a little worried about how fake this person looks and the direction of that. It all just feels a little bit too forced. So it really depends on what you're doing. Depends on what kind of shot you're going to take. Depends on how you want to set it up. Assets are important. Make sure they are adding to the USP though. Make sure they're adding to the features of the house. They're not just placed there arbitrarily. After we've done our assets, the next thing to think about is our landscape. So we know in our SketchUp model, we kept some of these lines in here because I had just a circle for a tree. That was easy enough for me to do. I've got some stepping stones here. We know that this is a planter box and there's another planter up the top there. So what we're going to do now is just start to fill that in. It's exactly the same process as adding assets into your scene, as adding your trees into your scene. So instead of adding people, we're going to go over to vegetation, and then we can look through our trees here. What I try to do is make sure that we've got some vegetation that looks like it belongs in the site. So if we're in the middle of Australia in Perth, we've got some spotted gums We've got some peppermint, WA peppermint, fine. If, however, we put a bunch of tropical looking plants that belong in either far north Queensland or Indonesia, really doesn't suit the picture. So just make sure you're choosing stuff that is relevant to the context of your particular architecture, of your case study, and then also for your projects when you're doing client renders as well. You can search, of course. I can search for a gum, which I've got some here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab a lemon scented gum. Pretty happy with that one. And I left in the trunk marks in my plan in the line, so I can bring that in there. And I think I'm going to do this one here. Okay, so that's brought in our tree, big beautiful eucalyptus here, lovely gum leaves. We can see that it is too big though. So what we need to do is we need to grab our tree and scale it. S for scale. And if we want to change just the height, we can grab the middle one, but we want to uniform everything. So we're going to grab this whole tree here and let's scale it to, let's try that size. M for move, bring it back in. We'll have a look at this one here, see how it feels. Maybe a little too small, given the space that we're looking at. Let's go a little bit bigger. We do have another big tree coming in behind, so we can go ahead and just massage this a little bit. Yeah, that is kind of matching the canopy that we've brought through here. Cool. And I'm just going to make a copy of this, or actually let's bring in a different tree and we'll do the same thing again. I'll zoom through that. A little bit too small again. Easy fixed. Trunk looks a little bit thick for a tree that size, but that's okay. It's getting the job done. And then let's go ahead and make our big boy out here. Back in again. And let's grab the Sydney red. Let's go something with a bit of color. Huge. Way too big. Beautiful, but too big. I don't actually like those yellow leaves either. Let's go ahead and change that out. And we're just going to go ahead and go for the Sydney red. Zoom out. S for scale. Scale it down. Appropriate tree size now. There we have it. What we may need to do though is, even though we know that the tree is sitting there, because the perspective is what's important to us in showing off that USP, we might actually go ahead and move this little guy over into our trees over there. There we go. That's looking better. Now I can still get that shot. I can still see the curvature in there, getting a nice line of sight. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. So that's our trees. Next thing we want to do is add in our planters that we've got up the top here. So we can go into planters. I like these hanging ones. You can kind of just chuck over the edge as well. So we can go one of these here and that'll pop up. Adds a nice shadow line over there. Add a wider one. Rotate that around. There we go, and we'll add a few more. For the sake of this exercise, what I'll do is I'll just copy them over, but you can just go ahead and take your time and add as many as you want to into this scene. And I'll chuck a hanging one over this edge here. Rotate that around. Bring that over. There we go. If I rotate my view over here, I can see I've got that hanging creeper. Pretty cool. Next thing is the hedge over on the right here in front of us. Much easier on two screens. I'm going to go with lavender. Again, I'm just going to make this easy for myself by copying them all the way along here, but you would go ahead and do this nicely. Add a bunch of different plants in as well rather than just the one. I can go ahead and grab all of those. I'm just going to pull them down a little bit, not so much that they stick out of the concrete, but enough that they come down a little bit. And out. And up a bit. And back in. And you just kind of massage that slowly until you get it to the position you want. Okay, that's looking a bit better. A little bit further in. Cool. Alright, so in this view now we've got our lavender along that edge. That's looking good. And then I just want to soften this edge of the grass along here. Grass doesn't typically just meet that edge so nicely, so we're just going to soften that up a bit. Get some kangaroo paw going in here. Get some grassy, bushy stuff. Let's have a look. I don't mind it actually. Just help to break up that edge condition of the grass there. Yeah, better. Cool. And that softens that a little bit, and then I just want something a little bit taller just to peek out of that. So back in here, just something like this. Yeah. Just to kind of break it up a bit of verticality. Nice. Cool. Just one in there. Yeah, good. All right, then we have a look around. If that's feeling a little bit too heavy over here, we can go ahead and move this guy down. Yeah, it's better. Move it in a bit. And this one up here, move it down. Better. This one, move it down. And this one, move it down a bit. Cool. All right. So again, you wouldn't just do copies of yours as you're going along in the vegetation. You'd break it up a little bit more so it doesn't look so cookie cutter. But you get the idea that we're trying to soften the edge of what we can see in the shot here. We're looking very much to show off our USP, our core features. So I like that big window, I like this curving sweep. And I like these arches running along here. And then of course we want to get it to roughly the height that we'd be standing inside that shot. If we look at this in a wide screen now, this is something more like this. And then in the next video, we're going to look at setting up our camera properly to make sure we can show up. But for now, our materials are working well. Our assets are working well on the inside in there. We've got everything speaking together nicely so we don't have any overlapping bits and pieces. And we've got our vegetation looking good. The next video, we'll look at fixing the lighting. We'll look at the time of day. We'll look at lighting interior versus exterior. And then we'll look at putting these shots together so that we can take the perfect exterior shots and the perfect interior shots. But for now, have fun putting together your model, playing around with your materials, assets, and your vegetation.